So I hope you're seeing my screen right now.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for your introduction. It's my great pleasure to share some of my research work in OpenFOAM with everyone here. I'm so impressed by how many attendants these 2 days at this workshop. So special thanks to organizers. Thank you for your great work. As was introduced, I'm currently in Technical University of Denmark, and I'll be joining National University of Singapore as an assistant professor since next semester, the fall semester. And today my presentation will be hopefully 25 minutes, so I will leave some time to answer your questions. So my research area is focused on coastal and offshore engineering field. And I've been using OpenFOAM as a research tool to conduct CFD simulations for related problems, covering the range from sea surface to the bottom. As you can imagine, ocean is such a complex system involving multi-physics. If we neglect the biological part and only consider the physical part, at the surface of the ocean, we have the free surface waves. The waves can be highly nonlinear, three-dimensional, and even breaking. So the waves itself is already a quite complex problem, and it will be our focus of the talk today. Moreover, below the surface, we have human-built structures, such as wind turbine foundations, offshore oil platforms, and submarine pipelines, and so on. So wave structure interaction is also a very interesting and complex problem, which you have already heard from Keynote speech by Edward and Christian just now. Further down to the sea bottom, we have the seabed soil. With the waves and the current pass around the structure foundation, it can cause scour. Scour is basically the soil segment being transported away by the flow and cause a scour hole around the foundation, which affect the foundation stability. Here, the stones, you can see here, they are for the purpose of scour protection. And regarding these problems, I'd like to first show you some interesting examples of my research work performed with OpenFOAM. This first one is a project performed during my PhD in the University of Stavanger in Norway. It's CFD modeling of wave-structure-seabed interaction for marine structures. And this is a model we built in OpenFOAM. It's multi-physics. You can see that it contains a free surface waves. The free surface is basically an interface between air and the water. And in the ocean, we also installed this is shallow water problem, and we installed a gravity-based foundation, wind turbine foundation, on top of the seabed. So below the foundation, we have the seabed domain. And here is a simulation snapshot that is performed in OpenFOAM. You can see the steep wave is approaching to the structure, and meanwhile, it will generate the stress in the soil beneath the structure. And further, the risk of soil liquefaction was assessed in this work. And Christian has just explained the liquefaction problem very well just now, so thanks for that. And our model is developed based on the previous work of Yasakwela and Tang. It is all because that the finite volume method for solid mechanics being made possible and also realized in OpenFOAM. So also with special thanks for the contribution from Dr. Philip Cardiff, who presented yesterday. Tang has gained pretty much help from him during the initial development of this model. I will not show too much details about this work because it's not our focus today, but if you're interested, you can check my paper published in Coastal Engineering, and also the solvers of this model is open sourced, and the details are given in this ocean engineering paper. So if you're interested, you can check these two publications. The second one I'd like to share is about the CFD simulation of scour around submarine pipelines with upward seepage flow in the soil. We have mentioned the scouring problem around subsea structures, and this model considers the current or the waves passing a pipeline. And below the pipeline in the seabed, there is seepage flow existing in the soil because the soil is a porous media. And this upward seepage flow behaves like an upward hydraulic gradient. So considering this effect from current and upward seepage, we have developed a model in OpenFOAM based on the work of Jacobson 2011 sediment transport model. Here you can see the change of the seabed during the scour process. And this work is basically using dynamic mesh technique. Again, for details, you can check my paper published in Coastal Engineering last year for more details. So the third one is related to our topic today, as my current project funded by EU Horizon 2020 Marie Curie Action. This project, named the Subsea, aims to accurately simulating the whole process of breaking waves. And here is the simulation also performed in OpenFOAM. You can see the wave is approximately breaking here. After breaking, there will be high turbulence level generated, showing these red colors. And before breaking, in the pre-breaking zones, is the blue zone means 0 turbulence level. So if we simulate waves propagating without wave breaking or other reasons that cause significant turbulence, we can simply use potential flow theory or laminar model in OpenFOAM. Because there's no turbulence generation, so no turbulence model is actually needed. But once the wave is breaking, the potential flow theory will collapse because the significant turbulence is generated. Therefore, we need safety model to solve such wave breaking problems. And today, the main part is about the turbulence modeling beneath progressive waves involve wave breaking. For coastal and offshore engineering problems, accurately modeling the waves is actually a first thing, but can be difficult sometimes. From this figure, you can see that breaking waves is a really fascinating phenomenon, but it can be a pretty big threat to coastal area and also the coastal infrastructures. And now with the climate change, we expect to see more extreme waves, and it can be a major threat to coastal lines and also offshore and the coastal structures. Therefore, accurately predicting the breaking wave hydrodynamics is very important. So problems such as breaking waves involve highly turbulent flows. But why do we need to model turbulence? Can it be resolved? It is possible to solve directly the Navier-Stokes equation without use of any modeling assumptions. And this approach is called a direct numerical simulation, or DNS in short, which you may know. And it requires to solve the extensive range of temporal and spatial scales of turbulent flow, from very large to very small scales of eddies, all the way down to the Kolmogorov length scale, so that the mesh resolution and time steps required to correctly solve the fluid structure scales is incredibly large. So this makes the DNS approach virtually impossible for engineering applications. And LES, large eddy simulation, is the next up. It resolves most of the scales and with the smallest eddies being modeled. As you may have heard from yesterday's keynote speech by Dr. Tom Smith on LES, he also mentioned that LES is less expensive than DNS, but it is still much more expensive than RANS and is not practical for many of the engineering problems. This is why Reynolds average Navier-Stokes simulation is the most commonly used approach for simulating turbulent flows, since it requires the lowest computational cost. And in RANS, only the large-scale eddy are resolved and the remaining scales are all modeled. Here's a comparison of the computational cost. You can see DNS is at the top, and it's the most expensive approach. For breaking waves, we have very large domain. The wave can travel like 100 meters to the breaking point and further a long distance to the shoreline. And also the breaking wave is a multi-phase problem. It includes a free surface. So DNS is impossible for such a problem. And LES is also less practical. So RANS is the most commonly used approach till today. In OpenFOAM, RANS models are classified as RAS, Reynolds Averaged Simulation Modeling. The popular RANS models are such as two-equation models. You may have heard or maybe have used the K-omega model, K-epsilon model, K-omega SST. And a more advanced RANS model is called renal stress models. It breaks free from the Bosonic assumption, and it considers anisotropic turbulence. It solves more equations than two-equation models. It will solve 6 renal stress equations plus 1 epsilon or omega equation. And one of example of the RSM model is LRR. So for breaking waves, I think as we have mentioned, RANS model is the most commonly used approach, and it has been applied since 1990s. However, a problem has prevailed in the past 2 decades. That is, we saw that CFD studies of breaking waves have shown an obvious tendency to severely overestimate turbulence levels, both pre and post-breaking. One example is a recent work by Brown et al. They have revealed that almost all of the RANS models have over-predicted turbulent kinetic energy, K, for the breaking wave simulations. And this figure shows waves propagate on a sloped seabed all the way to the shoreline, with water depths become smaller to the shore. So in the deep water region, the wave can be assumed as linear waves. So we don't need any turbulence models or any complicated wave theories for this part. So they're basically linear. As wave traveling to the shore, when the water depths become smaller, the wave will demonstrate more nonlinear behavior. So in this region, before wave breaking, nonlinear wave models can be applied. However, in this case, it involves wave breaking phenomenon, and the waves breaking approximately here. So before wave breaking, as we have mentioned, it can be regarded as potential flow theory, where no turbulence is generated. Show the turbulent kinetic energy, K, should be 0. However, it was found in Brown et al. 2016 that in this region, before wave breaking, where there should be no turbulent kinetic energy, that almost all of the RANS models have overpredicted the turbulence with a non-zero value here. So this will further pollute this region and induce over-prediction of turbulence in the whole domain. Also will further lead to inaccurate prediction of breaking points, and also further the undertow velocity will be fully accurately predicted. Actually, this problem has been found about 20 years ago in the pioneering work of Lin and Liu, 1998. They used K-epsilon model to simulate breaking waves, and their results are essentially similar to recent works. This overestimation problem of two equation models have actually been found 20 years ago. However, despite the great advances in computational power over the past 2 decades, the practical turbulence modeling of breaking waves, especially in the complicated surf zone, has remained relatively stagnant, with very little progress since 20 years ago. It's only until very recently, Larsen and Furman have derived a simple and elegant method for formally stabilizing two equation models and solve this long-standing problem for overprediction before wave breaking and in the outer surf zone. So before wave breaking zones here, and the outer surf zone is the zone right after breaking. And the further closer to the shoreline is called the inner surf zone. So this work was done in my current group at Technical University of Denmark by Dr. Bjarke Larsen and Professor David Furman. The marked improvement can be seen in these figures in A and B. Before wave breaking, the standard K-epsilon model, K-omega model, has already developed a very high turbulence level in this pre-breaking zone, which should be potential flow region without any turbulence. And this is incorrect physically. And with stabilized approach, the stabilized K-omega model has eliminated the overprediction of turbulence before breaking and also in the outer surf zone. So this figure C shows the enormously improved undertow velocity predicted by the stabilized model, which is in line with experiments. But if you see the standard K-omega model prediction, it's deviated from the experimental data, even with the wrong trend. This undertow velocity is an averaged vertical velocity profile beneath the wave surface. So this is considered a major improvement between the standard model to the stabilized model. So this breakthrough has also brought attention to the coastal engineering and also OpenFOAM community. The recent OpenFOAM version V1912 was released with the stabilization feature for two equation range turbulence models last year, especially for simulating waves and other related multi-phase problems. So here is specified as multi-phase stabilized turbulence. You can use this feature and define it in the FV option file in the constant folder. And here is a summary of unstable exponential growth rates of turbulent kinetic energy in the potential flow region beneath small amplitude waves based on the formal analysis of two equation turbulence models. Larsen and Furman has found that almost all of the two equation models are unconditionally unstable for simulating waves. They also predicted the turbulent kinetic energy growth rate, gamma infinity. And this gamma is a function of square root of P naught or P omega. This P naught and omega are positive for periodical waves after time and depth averaging. And with a positive value of gamma infinity, it means that the K, the turbulent kinetic energy, will grow exponentially with time when we simulate surface waves, which is actually a mathematical reason that almost built in the standard two equation models. And recently, Professor Furman and I analyzed a more complicated but popular two equation model, realizable K epsilon model. My colleague just told me that he was using star CCM. When you use epsilon model in star CCM, the default one is actually this realizable K epsilon model. And for this model, we have found that unlike other two equation models, this model is conditionally unstable depending on the initial conditions. And here we define the conditions with two parameters, gamma and eta, related to P naught and K and epsilon. So when the initial condition falls into the unstable zones, this realizable K epsilon model will have a growth rate about 3 times than other models, which will be extremely unstable for simulating surface waves. And we also proposed a method to formally stabilize this model. And this work was published in Physical Fluids. If you are using this model and interested in this work, you can have a look at this paper. So talking about unstable, if you still feel a bit vague about what the unstable behavior means, that I have mentioned many times just now for turbulence models when simulating breaking waves. Here is the simplest simulation you can perform in OpenFOAM, a 2D wave train simulation. And this one is performed with interFOAM using standard and stabilized realizable K epsilon model. Here, A and B are the wave elevations. And for this case, the initial condition falls into the unstable zone for realizable K epsilon model. And you can see if we use the standard realizable K epsilon model, the wave elevation will decay after about 20 to 25 wave periods. This is because the turbulence is increasing unphysically, and this part of the energy is taken from the wave, so it decays the wave elevation. With stabilization in B here, the waves are stably propagating. For other two-equation models, no matter what you set up for initial conditions, the wave will decay after some wave periods because they are unstable unconditionally. This is again due to the inherent problem within two-equation turbulence models, both K omega and K epsilon types. Here is an animation simulated by my colleague Dr. Bjarke Larsen using K epsilon, RNG, K epsilon, K omega, and K omega ST models. And you can see on the left column is the standard turbulence models, and also with buoyancy modification. So a buoyancy production term is added on to prevent some unphysical pollution at the free surface. And you can see on the left column, the standard model will cause the turbulence to grow beneath waves when the waves propagating. The red color means the turbulence level is high, and the blue means the turbulence level is almost zero. So on the right column, you can see the stabilized model really improved a lot. And because this is the potential flow in the potential flow region with small amplitude waves traveling without any turbulence generation. So with turbulence level becomes zero is actually physically correct. With the stabilized feature on the right, this overprediction problem that is inherently existed in two-equation models has been solved. This is considered a great improvement, a breakthrough. But the story has not ended here yet. Although we have proposed stabilized two-equation models to simulate breaking waves, which seems to perform perfectly in the pre-breaking and also in the outer surf zone. See this comparison between the black dashed line and the red circles. Red circles are experimental data, and the black dashed line is the stabilized K omega model. So for this undertow velocity profiles, it compares pretty well and improved a lot from the standard K epsilon model. However, in the inner surf zone, a problem still remains to be solved. That is, even the stabilized two-equation models are still rather inaccurate in this more complicated inner surf zone. The inner surf zone is further close to the shoreline. And this undertow velocity comparison reveals that there might be a limitation of two-equation models in this inner surf zone region. So it seems to require more advanced methods of achieving turbulence closure for accurately simulating breaking waves all the way from pre-breaking zone to the inner surf zone. So after some preliminary study, we decided to take renal stress models as a primary candidate. Two-equation models are very widely used as a standard engineering approaches. They are built upon the Bosnick approximation, or the Bosnick assumption of eddy viscosity, assuming isotropic turbulence. And this renal stress models, it resolves all components of the renal stress, breaking free from this Bosnick approximation. And the Reynolds tensor has 9 components, but because it's symmetric, so there's only 6 unknowns. The Reynolds stress models are, for example, ARR stress epsilon model, which was proposed earlier in 1970s, and the newer one is the Wilcox stress omega model. It contains 6 Reynolds stress equations and 1 omega equations. Since RSM resolves all components of the Reynolds stress, breaking free from the Bosnick assumption, so they are expected to produce more accurate results for predicting breaking waves, as they can capture the physics more realistically, comparing to two-equation models. Meanwhile, comparing to LES and DNS, RSM still have much lower computational cost than those two approaches. And one more thing is that according to NASA's Safety Vision 2030 study white paper, the advanced turbulence modeling based on anisotropic renal stress models is identified as priority for aeronautic technological advancement in the coming decades. And here, we are also very interested to see the RSM behaviors in the ocean, offshore, and coastal engineering field. especially for simulating waves, breaking waves. So we have conducted normal stability analysis for RCMs. RCMs are not as easy to analyze as two-equation models, so we had to come up with some new tricks for the stability analysis. We assumed it might be unstable, but contrary to our original expectation, we formally proved that RCMs are stable for modeling surface waves. And the problem existing in two-equation models, the overprediction problem, is not here for this RSM. And we found that actually the Bosniak's assumption of eddy viscosity is a fundamental reason for turbulence model instability in the potential flow region. And we have recently presented this finding in the International Conference on Coastal Engineering. With the formal proof that RSM is nearly stable, we applied it for simulating breaking waves. And we decided to use the omega-based RSM model in terms of the Wilcox 2006 stress omega model, since the omega model generally behaves more robust than the epsilon model, the LRR model during our preliminary study. And I coded this stress omega model in OpenFOAM, also added our newly derived Boyle's production term for simulating breaking waves. We can see in this animation that there was no turbulence generation before wave breaking, which is physically correct. For more quantitatively comparison, the surface elevation envelopes matches perfectly well with experimental measurements. This looks better than we have ever experienced with two-equation models. And moreover, for the undertow velocity profile, this figure we have seen before, you can see that the standard and also stabilized two-equation models cannot predict well the undertow velocity in the inner surf zone. And here is our RSM results. You can see the big improvements in the inner surf zone. And this is also the first time to achieve an accurate modeling of breaking waves from pre-breaking zone to the inner surf zone with a single turbulence model approach. And here's a comparison of turbulent kinetic energy, also some improvements as well. And one more case is the plunging breaker simulation. For plunging breaker, the crest of the wave becomes much steeper than the spilling breaker we just see now. You can see that when the wave breaks, let's see if I can restart the simulation. So when the wave breaks, you can see it's like the crest curves over and drops on the preceding wave trough. So this is the plunging breaker behavior. And more quantitative comparison for the surface elevation envelope, it is again matched very well with experimental data. And undertow velocity, this is predicted by stabilized K omega model. Again, you can see a deviation in the inner surf zone. And now with RSM, magic shows. So this good prediction of RSM is mainly due to its theoretical superiority. But because RSMs are more complicated to implement than two-equation models and also more sensitive to mesh grids, also slightly more expensive than two-equation models, they have not been widely used in engineering practice, especially has not been properly used in coastal engineering. So our current work is considered as the first formal analysis and also successful application for this model and showing very promising results, especially in breaking wave modeling. More recently, we have applied this RSM model to simulate three-dimensional wave instability in terms of the crescent waves, which you have seen actually on the first slide of my presentation, if you can remember. This wave instability is due to 3D perturbation. Initially, it is a deep water 2D wave train, but with 3D disturbances, the carrier wave will interact with the perturbation. So it becomes steeper and then breaks. You can see after wave breaking, there will be a turbulence generated beneath the waves. So this kind of 3D waves are actually commonly seen in the ocean. This simulation is performed with the Anisotropic Wilcox 2006 stress omega model in OpenFOAM v1912. And I will release this model to be open sourced at some point. Here's the photo for crescent wave shape in the open sea. our simulation with OpenFOAM can mimic the phenomenon very realistically. And we also validated our simulation against the experimental data, which compares very well. So here is another pretty promising application with the renal stress turbulence models. So it's just 30 minutes now, and before the end of this presentation, I'd like to circulate an advertisement. So I will be joining National University of Singapore as an assistant professor from next semester. So now I will have available PhD positions with full scholarship at NUS. And the research area will be related to CFD and the coastal engineering problems, such as breaking waves, liquefaction, sediment transport, and also turbulence modeling. So if you have a related background and if you are interested to study in Singapore, you're welcome to send me your CV transcript to my email address here. Currently, I'm using DTU mailbox. And a master degree is required. So either you have already obtained a master degree or you're going to obtain it. Moreover, an OpenFOAM background is very welcomed. So thank you for your attention. And now you're welcome to ask questions if you have any.